Hello, everyone. This is Gavin Escolar, founder of the Chaga Company, and this is Chaga Chat. Today, we are with Susan Goldhor. She is a biologist who's a longtime president of the Boston Mycological Society and a columnist for both, Boston Mycological Club, and a columnist for both the Fungi magazine and Mushroom the Journal. And she's not a mycologist, but she's a biologist, and she heads that. She's also very enthusiastic, curious, and an eager processalizer of the importance of fungus in the environment. Thank you very much for being a guest of the Chaga Chat, Susan. How are you doing today? How's Massachusetts? Or are you in Massachusetts right now?
Well, no, I'm actually in New Hampshire, in the foothills of the White Mountains.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Wow. It must be gorgeous over there. It's a nice summer day.
It is gorgeous, but it's also it's also very hot and buggy, but it is gorgeous.
It is gorgeous. So,
yeah.
Susan, tell us about where you developed how did you get into fungus, mushrooms, and all of that stuff? What developed your passion towards it and led you to become the president of the Boston Mycological Club?
Well, there was a big gap of years between my getting interested and becoming president of the club. But yeah. I think I got in the way a lot of people get in, which is that I was living somewhere where I found puffballs in the lawn. Yeah. And I learned that they were edible. And the idea of free food just springing up was so seductive. But until at that point, I was living in Western Massachusetts. Okay. But until I moved to Cambridge, and joined the Boston Mycological Club, I didn't really have a way to learn more. Mm-hmm. So I started learning more about different mushrooms, but and people in the club weren't that friendly. And I thought maybe if I volunteered to do something, they would be more friendly. Okay. So I volunteered to write a column based on the newsletters of all the other mushroom clubs in the country. And most of them were boring, but every now and then they would have an article about the biology of fungi. Mm-hmm. I am a biologist, and that started to really interest me. And every time I would read one of these articles, I'd go online and I'd learn more about whatever that subject was. Oh, wow. And I ended up not finding that I was not that interested in learning how to identify hundreds of mushrooms and even eat all of them, but that fungal biology was absolutely amazing. Wow. It was like this was the hidden key to the terrestrial ecosystem.
Awesome. That is so cool. That's so good to hear. So Susan, let me ask you this. What is it? A lot of people, they don't even know what a fungi is, more or less what a mushroom is. And what is the difference between a fungi and a mushroom?
Well, it's sort of like saying, what is the difference between an animal and a mouse? In other words, the animal is the kingdom. Yes. And a mouse is one particular species of within that kingdom. Right. So the fungi, which used to be, originally they were thought to be plants. Yeah. It wasn't until around 1930 that they were given a kingdom all of their own. Mm-hmm. But they are so different from plants. In fact, now that we can look at DNA, we know that fungi are closer to animals than to plants in their genetics.
So we're closer to fungi than to plants.
Yes. Yes, both of us are inhaling oxygen and exhaling carbon dioxide. And of course, are plants are what brought oxygen to our planet.
Yeah, so they're reverse, right?
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And also, like us, fungi depend on plants to get their carbohydrates. They see a
Oh,
fungus cannot photosynthesize. Only a plant can make carbohydrates, and everybody else depends on the plants,
even fungi.
especially fungi.
And fungi is the kingdom, and one subset of that is mushrooms, like moss, lichens, algae. Is that part of the fungi world? Algae is not, but
No, no.
mhm.
Some people, when you have
Mhm.
a lichen is a fungus that has taken algae prisoner.
Ah,
So some people think of algae as being like it, but they're just the slaves of that particular fungus.
I see. Like a cordyceps and a caterpillar and stuff like that. So yeah, a lot of people, they think of chaga as a mushroom, and some people does advertise chaga as a mushroom, but it's really not. It's part of a
Right.
fungi.
It is
Yeah.
absolutely not a mushroom.
Uh-huh.
And what it is it is the response of the birch tree to a pathogenic fungus,
Mm-hmm.
not a mushroom, by
Yeah.
the way, because one thing to keep in mind is that there are millions of species of fungi in the
Mm-hmm.
world.
Yes.
And of those, a teeny, teeny fraction happen to produce mushrooms.
Correct.
So,
And
mushrooms are just a little subset of fungi.
mm, so now let's go. A lot of people think that is now a truffle that we all know is a fungi, but is that a mushroom?
Chaga?
No,
Or
truffles.
truffles, yes, truffles absolutely are mushrooms. Truffles are mushrooms that have decided to live underground.
Mm,
And there are truffle members of most of the major families of mushrooms. So they really are mushrooms.
okay.
They have the same relationship with trees underground that other mushrooms might.
Okay.
And usually they decide to become truffles because it is an arid climate.
Okay.
And once a mushroom dries out, it can't release its spores.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be moist and living to release its spores.
Correct.
So, in a very dry climate, truffles have the advantage of being able to stay moist, which,
Underneath the ground, yes.
right, which is why there is so many species of truffles in Australia, which
Mm,
is basically a pretty dry country.
yes.
So there are about 5,000 species of truffles in the world.
Wow.
And often you'll read about truffles and people will say, there are 20 species or there are couple hundred species. And that's because, as usual, they are being anthropocentric and they are only really interested in the genus of truffles that we eat.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes, yes.
But in fact, there are about 5,000 species of truffle, and they are fascinating because they depend upon attracting animals to spread their spores. I mean, they're underground,
Yes.
They have a watertight covering that keeps them moist, but through that covering, they are emitting a powerful odor.
Oh,
And
interesting.
when the truffles that we like make an odor that we find attractive. It's actually very sexual.
Mm-hmm.
And for the other types of truffles emit odors that often for us are disgusting. I mean,
Yeah.
they smell like dog shit, or they smell like kerosene. They
Yeah.
have all kinds of odors, but the odor is geared to what species of animal they want to attract. And
Yeah.
truffles spread their spores by that animal eating them and
Mm-hmm.
then defecating out their spores somewhere else.
Oh.
And also in a place like Australia, or any place where you have a lot of wildfires, often the animals that dig for truffles and spread the spores they're playing a really major role in the regrowth of the forest after this disaster.
Wow, that's cool.
Right. So truffles actually often play a big ecological role.
Oh, that's awesome. So
Right.
that's great. Now I'm going to talk about a little bit about chaga, Susan. And so now that we know that it is not a mushroom, but
Right.
it's a byproduct of a chaga fungus inside the birch tree, is that correct?
Well, it's a pathogen. It's
Mm-hmm.
sort of something that irritates the birch.
Okay.
And so the birch is sort of forming it's like, there often one sees these growths on trees,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a response to some irritating or pathogenic organism, and the tree is trying to,
Spell it
um,
out.
yeah, to sort of keep it sequestered
Okay.
or inactivate it.
How
And
about like a pearl? It's trying to like build something around it and just trying to get it out. Is that something a good?
well, the tree can't get it out. It
I
doesn't
see.
know how to get it out, but it can sort of push it to
Okay.
one, you
One
know,
side.
separate, right?
Okay.
And,
Okay. Okay.
and they keep the birch in order, because it's been irritated by this fungus, uh, also generate certain compounds, especially one called betulin.
Yes. And that's what a lot of people use for to better themselves or whatever they use it for. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And just wondering, with chaga, is there's only one species? Or is it like a truffle with many different types too as well? Or
I, I
Hmm,
think it's just one species, but
okay.
Gavin, I am not this is not something I'm an expert on.
Yes. Okay.
If
And
you
let me
know
ask
more
you,
about it than I do.
yes. Let me ask you this. Like, for example, let's go back to other mushrooms because a lot of people, they just don't know. Like, a reishi is a mushroom. That's a polypore. Is that correct? And
Yeah.
then what else? Lion's mane is also a mushroom, but they look all so different than the quintessential white button mushrooms. And I really suggest that people should go to, for example, the Boston Mycological Club or the Mycological Club of San Francisco to get themselves over it. But if you could give us a general, how does one connect with you guys and how to hang out with you guys and all of that good stuff, to just open up my audience to the mycological clubs and everything. How does one go?
Right. Well, if you were just going to Google probably
Yeah.
mycological clubs, they are scattered all over, but each one is a little different. One thing, for example, our club is quite big. We have, if we include family members, we probably have 700 or 800 members.
Active.
And there are other clubs that may have 30 members.
Yeah.
So, and each club also, it's sort of what that club wants to do.
Yeah.
So some clubs really have an emphasis on science, and often they will try to get their members to keep track of every specimen they find and bring back the sample and fill out a form and use this in sort of there are places where you can organize this on a national level. And then there are other clubs that exist mostly for banqueting.
Yes.
So, but I think most clubs try to educate their members. And there's always interest in edibles.
Yes.
So one of the things that, for example, our club, every year we hold the beginners series of classes. And this is a series for beginners to learn how do you identify a mushroom?
Yes.
Because we don't want them to be poisoned.
Yes, and you just said earlier before we record, you just finished a Zoom class about distinguishable edible mushrooms. How do you say?
Unmistakable edibles.
Unmistakable edible mushrooms. I think that is such a good way for you to start.
Right. Then
with adventure. Yeah.
So that's sort of the first class, and it gets people into it, and it tells beginners that what I do is I give them a baker's dozen of mushrooms that grow in the Northeast that will carry them sort of from the beginning of May to the end of October in terms of finding them at different seasons, that they cannot really make a mistake about if they remember what I've told them. And some of them, like the other day I found chicken of the woods.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Chicken of the woods is unmistakable.
Yes.
Absolutely. When you have orange shelves on a dead trunk, that's it.
Yeah.
But others are, there's a possibility, but they really, a lot of times when people say that there's a lookalike, it isn't really a lookalike if you really. So one of the things that's really interesting to me when I think about the 13 species that I teach them about is that 6 of those are what we would call mushrooms. They have a cap and a stem. They're mycorrhizal, which means that they have an underground connection with the roots of trees. Then they have a mutualistic relationship. The tree is giving them sugars, and they are giving the tree things like phosphorus, and there's an exchange constantly going on. And the other 7 mushrooms or species that I tell them about are rot fungi. Some of them are rotters, like puffballs.
Yeah.
And some of them are pathogens that are, tree diseases.
Yeah. Yes.
And it's amazing. I'm constantly fascinated at how delicious some of these disease-causing fungi can be.
So let me ask you this. Is reishi a disease?
Yeah.
It is. And so is
Well,
lion's mane, honestly.
I'm not sure it's a disease. It may just be a rotter.
Ah,
See, that I'm sorry, Gavin, that I can't really answer that question accurately.
no
It could
problem.
just be, I mean, because there's a real difference.
Yeah.
You know, imagine if we didn't have rot in the world. I mean, imagine that we would be buried
In our,
under,
yeah.
yeah. And what, when you have wood or even things like straw, it's composed of cellulose and lignin.
Yes.
Cellulose is very easy to degrade.
Uh-huh.
Lots of organisms can do it. In fact, 25% of people can actually do it if they have a long enough GI tract
Uh-huh.
to have the bacteria in it that can
Yeah.
break down cellulose. But lignin is very, very difficult to break down.
And only fungi.
Yeah, it's like a plastic. It's like,
Mm.
if you can imagine sort of the hard black plastic of old telephones, the
Yeah.
ones that last forever.
Yes,
That's
like
lignin
that.
is. And it's lignin that allows us to have trees. Lignin is kind of the structural element that gives trees the strength to grow
Okay,
up
I see.
and
Uh-huh.
maintain their structure. And fungi are the organisms in our world that can break down lignin.
Oh, nice.
But and it's not a simple enzyme. It's not as if they have a lignase.
Yeah.
They actually do it by generating hydrogen peroxide.
Oh, wow.
Yes, it's a powerful, powerful oxidizing agent.
The
It's
fungi generates hydrogen peroxide.
apart. Right. And it took them a long time to do that because when trees first evolved,
Yeah.
nothing could break them down.
Yes.
So they just fell into the ground and they kept rotting. Well, they didn't rot.
Up.
Right. And that was the Carboniferous era.
Oh.
And it went on for 70 million years. And at that time, the US and England and Western Europe, they were joined. They were all part of one thing. And that part, we were on the equator. So places like Africa were down near the Antarctic. They were really, really cold. So we were, and that is why when the Industrial Revolution happened, like here and in England, because we had the coal.
Oh.
It was those unrotted trees and stuff that ultimately formed coal.
Oh.
And during this period, incredible quantities of carbon dioxide were sequestered. Oxygen levels were so high that sometimes spontaneous fires broke out.
Oh, because of the high, oxygen is very flammable.
Yeah, there is and that's also, by the way, when you see artists' murals, artists' ideas of what the Carboniferous era looked like, you see these giant dragonflies, dragonflies that are like this.
Yeah.
And that is because insects don't really have lungs, and their ability to get oxygen depends on the partial pressure of oxygen in air. So was much higher, so they could have bigger bodies. The oxygen could
Wow.
drive in further. So what happened was that we took all that 70 million years of sequestered carbon dioxide
Uh-huh.
and we burnt it in an incredibly short period of time.
And then we evolved alongside with it.
No, that's what's causing climate change.
Ah,
The
okay.
cause of global warming and climate change was taking 70 million years of sequestered carbon dioxide and just burning through it.
Oh, wow.
So
Yeah. We're in this world now. Hi. Oh my goodness. So, Susan, let me ask you this. How can one reach out to you? And can you tell us a little bit more about the Boston Mycological Club?
oh, all you have to do, excuse me, all you have to do is go on the internet
Mm.
and write in Boston Mycological Club.org,
And you guys pop out.
and it will pop up. In fact, you probably can just Google it without, putting it into the .org type thing. And you will get to our website
Yeah.
and you can join. It's easy to become a member. Our club is 125 years old. And
Wow.
when it started, you had to be approved. They had to take a vote. You had to have 2 members. But now all you have to do is press the PayPal button and, and pay $20 or $25 for a family membership.
Oh, fantastic.
And you're a member, and we have a lot of activities. Unfortunately,
Mm.
because of the pandemic,
Yes.
we had to cancel our walks.
Oh.
Normally, we have a long season of walks, but there's no way to do it with
No.
social distancing.
No.
And we've at first we canceled our talks, but then we realized that we could Zoom them.
Yes, you can.
Right. So we have had Zoomed talks, and not just our beginners classes, but also having outside speakers. So our first Zoom talk this spring was on psilocybin, on psychedelic mushrooms.
Uh-huh.
And the next one was on a very bizarre fungus that attacks cicadas and castrates them. And so they've lost their genitals, but they still keep trying to mate, and they fly around. And as they fly around, the spores of the fungus that attack them drop out of their abdomens.
Because there's no genitals, so it just like keeps on.
Right. Well, their whole rear end has become just a mass of fungal spores.
Wow.
And so the title this talk had a fabulous title, which was "Flying Salt Shakers of Death."
You guys have some humor too as well. That's awesome.
So I mean, what we try to do is both teach our members about mushrooms and edible mushrooms, because we know that this is of interest to them, but we also try to teach them about the larger role that fungi play in the world.
Ah, that's awesome. That is really good. And you guys do have culinary series too as well. Do you guys have recipes online on your website?
Yes, we do. We do. Since we've started Zooming, we have been recording talks, and putting them on the website, and there's a lot of stuff on the website. And also, when we don't have a pandemic, we have a banquet, we have a potluck that's really fun. We have lots of talks, but also lots of socializing.
That's great. So thank you so much, Susan, for all the advice and about the Boston Mycological Club, alongside what's the difference between mushrooms and chaga and other mushrooms too as well. Hope to see you guys soon, and thank you very much for joining Chaga Chat. Take care.
Well, thank you, Gavin, and bye.
Bye.